Welcome back. I'm really glad you were here with us today because we are stepping into what is genuinely a defining moment of the 20th century.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge turning point.
Right. So for today's deep dive, we are pulling from a really comprehensive Wikipedia article detailing the Battle of Cantigny. And our mission today is to explore the very first major American battle and offensive of World War I.
And it's one that a lot of people overlook, honestly.
Exactly. This isn't just, a story about moving lines on a map. It's a profound shift in global history. It just gets overshadowed by the massive engagements that came after it.
It really is a crucible moment. Because to really appreciate what happened at Cantigny, you have to understand the sheer weight of the strategic situation in Europe right then.
Right. Let's set the scene for everyone.
So it's May of 1918. The world has been at war for 4 agonizing years. The Western Front is just this landscape of unimaginable devastation. And the Allies are facing a literal crisis of survival.
The situation was, beyond dire. The German military had launched what was known as the Michael Offensive. It was this massive, desperate push to just win the war outright before American industrial might could fully arrive and tilt the scales.
And that was working.
It was terrifyingly successful. It was literally threatening Paris. Meanwhile, the French army, which had been bleeding into the mud since 1914, was stretched to its absolute breaking point.
Yeah, they had mutinies the previous year. Morale was hanging by a single thread.
And into this apocalyptic meat grinder arrives the United States military. It's kind of like being the new kid on the block who suddenly has to prove they can hold their own in this incredibly high-stakes team project, right?
It's a great way to put it, which presents this really fascinating dynamic. You have the French and British who are just battle-hardened, exhausted, and deeply cynical after years of industrial slaughter.
Yeah.
And then you have the Americans. They bring immense manpower, fresh legs, but they have absolutely zero credibility in modern trench warfare.
None at all.
Right. The U.S. 1st Division, which was the most experienced of the 5 American divisions in France at the time, was just sitting in reserve. The French High Command was looking at these fresh, untested troops with a very critical eye.
They had to be thinking, can we actually trust these guys?
Exactly. They desperately needed to know if an American division could actually hold the line against a relentless, highly disciplined German war machine.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's the ultimate trial by fire for a rising global power. And the target chosen for this test was this location called Cantigny.
Right, the geography here is everything.
It really dictated how the whole battle would unfold. So Cantigny was a small village, but crucially, it was situated on high ground and entirely surrounded by dense woods.
And on the Western Front, elevated terrain wasn't just a tactical perk. It was practically a matter of life and death.
Absolutely, because if you control the high ground, you control the artillery.
Precisely. Cantigny served as an ideal observation post for the German forces. From up there, German spotters could see deep into the Allied lines, monitor troop movements, and just direct their own artillery fire with terrifying, lethal accuracy.
It was a huge thorn in the Allied side.
It was. The German 18th Army had pushed this small salient, basically a bulge, into the Allied territory, specifically to secure that vantage point. So the American objective was to attack this fortified position, flatten the salient, and blind the German artillery spotters.
But assaulting a fortified, elevated observation post is a monumental task for any military, let alone one that is quite literally just entering the theater of war.
It's a huge ask.
It really is. The assault force designated for this operation was the 28th Infantry Regiment, commanded by Colonel Hanson Edward Ailey. They were supported by 2 companies of the 18th Infantry Regiment, a company of engineers and machine gunners.
So we're talking about roughly 3,500 men total.
Yeah, about 3,564 men, to be exact.
Right.
But here is the stark reality that often gets left out of the triumphant national narratives. These American troops arrived radically under-equipped for the realities of modern industrialized warfare.
It's one of the most sobering aspects of the American entry into the First World War. The United States had the manpower, but they simply did not possess the heavy weaponry, the specialized gear, or the mechanized armor required to pull off a frontal assault on a fortified hill in 1918.
They were practically walking in with just rifles and grit.
What's fascinating here is the massive logistical support provided by the French to compensate for those American shortfalls. The French military had to step in and essentially bankroll the American offensive with their own technology and firepower.
And the sheer scale of that French logistical umbrella is staggering.
It really is. I want you to imagine the sheer scale of this multinational coordination. Because the Americans lacked the heavy gear, the French provided comprehensive air cover to keep German planes from strafing the advancing infantry. They hauled in 368 heavy artillery pieces to soften the German defenses. They supplied trench mortars to lob explosives over the German parapets. And they brought in flamethrowers.
Flamethrowers, which, in the horrific close-quarters reality of trench warfare, were a terrifying tactical necessity.
They were. They used them to clear out those deep, reinforced dugouts where artillery shells just couldn't reach, to ensure that bypassed German troops couldn't emerge and shoot the advancing Americans in the back.
Right. And beyond the artillery and the flamethrowers, the French provided what was arguably the most crucial asset for an offensive in 1918, which was armor.
Yes, the tanks.
They deployed French Schneider tanks from their 5th Tank Battalion, and these early tanks were entirely focused on a single vital mission, rolling ahead of the infantry to crush the entrenched German machine gun nests that would otherwise chew an unprotected assault force to pieces.
Imagine being an American infantryman advancing under that protective umbrella of French steel and fire.
Try to picture the visual of that coordination. You have thousands of American infantrymen standing shoulder to shoulder in their jump-off trenches, preparing to charge into the teeth of the German defenses.
Hearts pounding, I'm sure.
Definitely. But their entire protective canopy, the steel raining down in front of them, the armor grinding through the mud beside them, the aircraft circling overhead is entirely French. It is an incredible display of an alliance functioning at the absolute edge of human endurance.
And that coordination required a level of timing and discipline that is just really difficult to comprehend today. Which brings us to the morning of the assault.
May 28, 1918.
Exactly. At precisely 06:45 in the morning, after an hour-long preparatory artillery bombardment designed to suppress the German guns, H-hour arrives.
The American troops climb out of their trenches, but this wasn't a chaotic blind charge across no man's land like you see in the movies.
No, not at all.
The success of the entire operation hinged on a tactic known as a rolling barrage. The 368 French heavy guns behind the lines were calibrated to drop a continuous curtain of high explosives just ahead of the advancing American troops.
It's basically a moving wall of fire.
Exactly. But to keep the infantry moving while keeping them protected, that wall of fire had to creep forward. The math from the source is incredible. It was calculated to advance exactly 100 meters every 2 minutes.
The psychological discipline required to execute this is immense. These American doughboys had to walk at a highly specific, deliberate pace right behind a literal moving wall of explosions.
And by the way, that iconic nickname, Doughboys, likely had roots in earlier conflicts, referencing the adobe dust on their uniforms in the Southwest or the doughy rations they carried.
Right, it's a classic term.
But the margin for error walking behind that barrage was effectively zero. The noise would have been physically concussive, the smoke blinding. If an American soldier walked too fast, his own adrenaline would carry him right into the blast radius of friendly French artillery shells.
And if the line moved too slowly, the creeping barrage would move too far ahead.
Right. The smoke would clear, giving the surviving German defenders precious seconds to climb out of their deep bunkers, man their heavy machine guns, and just mow the Americans down before they could cross the remaining distance.
It was a deadly, deafening, perfectly timed dance. And this is exactly where the integration of those French Schneider tanks proved decisive.
Oh, absolutely.
As that creeping wall of explosions rolled forward, the tanks emerged through the smoke alongside the infantry, specifically targeting and neutralizing the hardened German machine gun pillboxes that had survived the artillery prep.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Thanks to this immense preparation and the French tanks taking out the machine guns, the 28th Infantry Regiment captured the village of Cantigny in exactly 30 minutes.
Half an hour.
Half an hour, in a war defined by agonizing stalemates, where armies routinely fought and died for months just to move the line a few muddy yards. They swarmed the high ground, cleared the cellars, and pushed a half-kilometer beyond their objective.
The psychological impact of that 30-minute assault rippled across the entire Western Front.
It must have been a shock to the system for everyone.
Completely. It wasn't just about taking a small salient. It was about executing a flawlessly timed modern military operation on the world stage. They synchronized infantry, armor, heavy artillery, and air support without breaking formation.
The adrenaline of that rapid success must have been incredible. But as anyone who studies military history knows, the initial assault is often the straightforward part.
Always.
The dust settles, the momentum stops, and you suddenly realize you are now sitting in a shattered village occupying a salient that is exposed to the enemy on three sides.
Taking ground is one thing, but holding it against a furious, highly capable enemy who desperately needs that observation post back is a completely different kind of nightmare.
Yeah, the German forces were not simply going to concede the high ground and walk away.
Almost immediately, the dynamic of the battle shifted. The Americans went from being the attackers orchestrating the violence to the defenders enduring it. The Germans subjected them to a relentless artillery bombardment for the rest of the day.
The timeline of the German pushback is agonizing. A small probing attack against the extreme right of the American lines hits at 8:30 in the morning and is repulsed.
Just testing the waters.
Exactly. Then the first large-scale, highly coordinated German counterattack slams into the American lines at 17:10.
Late afternoon. That was the moment the French command had been waiting to see. Would the untested Americans break and run under the pressure of veteran German shock troops?
The strain on the American line was immense, and right here, the text highlights a memorable historical cameo. To plug a critical weak spot in the line, the command sent in a company from the 26th Infantry Regiment, commanded by Major Theodore Roosevelt Jr.
Son of the former president.
Yes, putting his life on the line alongside his men to hold a pulverized piece of French countryside.
It's amazing.
With Roosevelt's reinforcements, they managed to crush that twilight assault. But the Germans hit them again at 18:40, sweeping out of the darkness, and again crushed by combined artillery and infantry fire.
The line did not break.
Yeah.
But we have to note the human cost over that multi-day defense. Holding a fixed position under continuous artillery bombardment is catastrophic.
The numbers are just brutal.
And when we look at the historical records surrounding the casualties, we really encounter the fog of war. There's an interesting discrepancy in the historical records.
Yeah, the source info box cites 318 killed and 1,400 wounded.
Right, but then the text itself mentions 1,603 total casualties, with 199 killed in action. That discrepancy isn't a failure of history. It's a reflection of the chaotic nature of historical battlefield records.
It's impossible to track accurately when men are being buried and unburied by shells over 72 hours.
Exactly. But regardless of the specific tally, suffering upward of 1,600 casualties in an assault force of 3,500 means an attrition rate approaching 50%.
A staggering level of sacrifice. And I want to bring those massive numbers down to a single, poignant human life. The text mentions Matthew B. Wan. He was a Pima Native American who was killed in the battle.
A tragic loss.
He became the first known Arizonan to die in combat in WWI. Every single digit in those casualty reports represents a person like Matthew who left behind his family and community to fight on a hill in France.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the aftermath is fascinating. Though it was a relatively small geographical gain and kind of overshadowed by the larger Aisne offensive happening around the same time, Cantigny was the exact triumph the Allies needed.
It proved they could do it.
It proved to the French that the Americans could hold the line. And that paved the way for famous, massive battles like Chateau Thierry and Belleau Wood just weeks later.
So what does this all mean? How does a 30-minute victory echo through the next century?
Well, the way Cantigny has been memorialized is really telling.
The monuments started going up almost immediately. In 1919, just a year later, the 1st Division erected a monument featuring a concrete shaft and a carved stone eagle.
A very raw, immediate tribute to their fallen friends.
And then in 1937, the American Battle Monuments Commission dedicated a formal monument with inscriptions in both English and French.
Cementing the narrative of the alliance. And it doesn't stop there. In 2008, for the 90th anniversary, they dedicated the Lion of Cantigny statue by Stephen Spears, depicting a doughboy advancing.
Placed there by the Association of the 28th Infantry Regiment.
Right, the Black Lions. And they actually got that nickname from the Black Lions on the traditional heraldic arms of Picardy, the French region where Cantigny is located.
They fought so hard they absorbed the local symbol into their own identity. But here's a surprising geographic trivia piece. The most surprising physical legacy of this battle isn't in France at all.
No, it's in the American Midwest.
Colonel Robert R. McCormick, who commanded artillery at the battle, was so profoundly moved by the experience that when he returned home, he renamed his massive 500-acre estate outside Chicago to Cantigny.
That's incredible.
It now houses a 1st Division War Memorial. It perfectly encapsulates the journey from a heavily fortified French hill to a sprawling estate in Chicago.
the enduring ripple effect of history.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We've covered the brutal pressure of 1918, the flawless 30-minute assault utilizing French tech, the agonizing defense, and the legacy left behind.
It's vital history to keep alive. And this raises an important question I want to leave you with.
Let's hear it.
Given that America's very first major victory in World War I relied almost entirely on borrowing heavy artillery, flamethrowers, and tanks from the French, how did the shock of arriving at a global war so radically under-equipped forever alter how the United States would approach industrializing its own military technology in the decades that followed?
That is a phenomenal question for you to ponder. Keep turning that over in your mind, keep asking questions, and above all, stay curious. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.